to introduce Natalie to you.
Hello.
Natalie, can you share with this group who you are and what you started, the career that you started with, the career that you actually had, um, and then where you are today, what you're doing today. That way we can just take some time to get to know you on this call.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I bet I can probably match anyone who's come on and said, "Oh, I had a very interesting first job out of school or first job," because I really did have a very interesting first job. I got my degree in psychology and I wanted to be a psychologist, but I didn't want to keep going to school, which now I can't understand why I would have ever made that decision. So I got my bachelor's degree and moved on. And I needed a job. I needed to do something. So I'm going through the want ads in the early 90s, literally the newspaper circling things. And I came across a job that said, we're looking for someone with a bachelor's in psychology. We don't get that opportunity a lot. So I circled it and called them and set up the interview and without a lot of information, honestly, I went to interview. It was for a dating service. So my
Oh,
very first
wow.
job out of school was as a matchmaker.
I
And
can't
I
even
It
believe
was
that. That is
fantastic.
so
See,
funny.
I always keep that tucked away for like, what's something we don't know about you? But I really spent the first year and a half after school. I mean, I was in my, early 20s with a blue card, a pink card. It was the early 90s, and you were matching people up based on what they said they liked, some of their experiences. And of course, over time, you're getting to know people, obviously, with the goal being that you connect people together and they form a bond and connection in a relationship. So, in this year and a half period of time, I had 9 couples who got married, which was amazing. I know. I don't know what
Woo!
happened after that, but I know they got married, but it was a lot of fun. Now, that job, it just gave me a little bit of a start, but I can honestly say I never had an idea other than wanting to be a psychologist, which was kind of planted in me, that love of psychology when I was in junior high.
Mhm.
Um, but other than that, I didn't have an idea of what I wanted to do when I grew up. So I just sort of meandered through my career for many years and opportunities would come along. So, here's the opportunity to be a matchmaker. And then when I decided that I wasn't going to do that anymore, I I was literally in a store that I like to shop in when I started talking to them about a job, and they said, "Oh, you should come work here. You should come be a manager of our store." So I kind of fell into that career. Then I met a customer who I ended up being a recruiter during Y2K, which was a really tense time to be a recruiter. And um, from there, it just kind of kept going and going, but there was not a clear path, which for me felt a bit empty, but it also felt exciting because I was getting to learn new things all the time. I wasn't nervous about changing jobs, though I might not be content in a job and I might not feel great about it. I wasn't nervous about having to go out and learn a new skill and do something new. So after that sort of random path for about, I don't know, 12 to 14 years, I had the opportunity to interview with Southwest Airlines for a job in their financial planning and analysis department.
Mm.
And you might think that I would need some finance experience to do that, and probably should have had some, but I didn't. And I was just very upfront and very honest about, my lack of knowledge of anything financial, but also my experience and what I had already done in my career. And they hired me. They took a chance on me and they hired me into just an entry level role. My
Mm.
former boss, who's still a very good friend of mine, said, "We knew you had no idea what you were doing, but we also knew that you could learn and you had a good attitude. And Southwest is known for hiring for attitude and then training skills." So I ended up in finance. I ended up being a leader in the finance department, learning things I never thought I would be able to learn. Certainly, learning a lot about the airline industry itself. Not scared of spreadsheets anymore and
Mhm.
financial information. But I got to a point in my career, and I'll call that my career, where I just thought, I can't I can't read another budget footnote. I just can't do it. I cannot go in and ask people to cut more costs. I just can't do it. So I didn't have a lot of I guess, satisfaction in the work I was doing, though I could really see the value and the importance in the work that I was doing. It just wasn't me. And I thought, I'm going to work for at least another 15 years. Let me do something that I like to do. So I did what I think happens with a lot of coaches. I talked to someone who said, you should go talk to a coach. And so she referred me to someone. I sat down with this coach, and my original ask was, could you help me learn to like my job? I have a good career. I work for an incredible company. The future is bright. Could you just help me learn to appreciate what I have and let me just keep going in this direction? And the more we talked and the more she shared some just, general coaching exercises with me and some thoughts, and I saw what she was doing, I just knew. I was like, no, what she does, what you do is what I need to do. There's I that question has been answered for me. It's not figuring out how to love finance, it's figuring out how to become a coach. So I did. I went in, and within probably a couple of months, I did get a little nervous and hesitant. Within a couple of months, I went in and I shared with my leaders, I'm not going to continue my career in the finance department here. I'm not on in your bench planning, your succession planning anymore. I'm going to start looking for something around coaching, around learning and development. And I had signed up for a coach training. They said, well, we need that here, actually. You've been a leader in the department. You've been with us for a long time. We really need someone who will help us with our leaders, who will help develop our leaders. So how about if we open up a position and you step into that and you do leadership development here in FP&A? That was the best experience of my entire life. I mean, not only did I feel very honored and privileged to be able to do that, but it was so much fun because I was learning, and I laugh. I'm like, I had this little guinea pig of leaders, and I was like, oh, let's see what we can do. I'm just learning this. Do you mind trying this exercise? Or how about if we hold this workshop? What would this look like? And there's things that I did there that I'm now doing now, and I didn't know at the time what they were called. And now I'm like, oh, well, that's a real thing. I just didn't realize it. So it was every prayer I ever prayed answered right there. And it was just amazing, amazing experience. I did that for about 3 years. I stepped back into part-time because I knew I wanted to stand up my own practice. And so I just went part-time and started playing with the idea of, building up my own practice and getting new clients. And then the pandemic came along, and Southwest was very generous in trying to get people out, like so many companies were. So I took that opportunity to leave the organization and then go full time. And so now I work as a coach, a facilitator. I do workshops for folks. I do a little speaking for folks. I do anything that's connected to helping people move from point A to point B, which brings me full circle around to my matchmaking job, because I didn't know at the time that all I was doing was helping take people who were not in a relationship, who wanted to move to a relationship, go from A to B, and help them get there. So as odd as my career path looks, if you try to map it out, it has always been full of of helping people uncover what it is that they want, that need within them, and then helping them figure out how to get over there to it. So that's the story of how I got here. That's what I do now. I do a lot of strengths coaching. I'm an ICF coach, so I do a lot of just good old leadership coaching with folks that are looking for, what's my next move going to be? How am I going to get to that next either promotion or that next role? But more of it for me comes in around, how am I just going to be my very best self and find some peace and contentment in that? There is nothing wrong with being ambitious and with being, really a go-getter with things, but we've got to have some internal peace also, or none of the things that we go get are going to be enough for us. So that's what I love to do every single day with people.
And so are you working with them like where you meet with them once a month or every 2 weeks? Like what's like a typical coaching engagement look like for you? And is it on the personal side where people are paying out of their own pocket to hire you for a coach, or is it corporations that hire you for coaching?
Yeah, all of the above. So I do partner with a lot of groups that have what you might call a coaching bench. And so I'm part of that bench. And as folks are looking for a coach, I'll do a chemistry call with them, or they'll just be referred directly to me. And we might meet. I prefer to meet every other week, especially in the beginning, because in the beginning we're getting to know each other, we're building up some momentum, and we want to see people really being able to see that this coaching thing works early on. Um, Throughout, depending on how long the engagement is, we may go to once a month at some point.
Mhm.
But I also have my own personal clients. So I have clients that over the years have been referred to me from other folks, and they may be paying out of pocket for the
Mhm.
coaching sessions. And then we just determine how long the engagement should be that way. But I don't have a I don't put it together and like it must look like this. It's like, well, what do we need to do? What's the opportunity here? What do we need to do? How do we work on this together? And then we put that in place.
And what are the typical types of things that
Mhm.
people come to you for?
Yeah.
What are they asking you for?
So some of this is me. I'm very honest with people when I'm coaching them, or when we're having a chemistry call up front. So if someone comes to me and they're like, all I really care about is that I get that next promotion. Okay, that sounds important. We're going to go a little deeper. If you're not comfortable going a little deeper, that's okay. There's a coach out there that can really give you the very tactical steps to how you move forward. And that may be exactly what you need right now. But I'm going to ask you questions that you're not going to want to answer. And if you're not ready to do that, then I'm probably not the right coach for you, which means that I do get rejected by people who think that, that sounds scary, or it's simply not what they're looking for. Um, but oftentimes they come with something like, gosh, I'm terrible with presentations and communication, and I'm always having to speak in front of people, and I'm so intimidated. Or my schedule is a mess and I can't handle it, and I'm burning out. Or, I'm not happy in my career and where I am. What do I do? We can start with that as the problem, and what we move into as quickly as possible is what's going on with the person. And so instead of it just becoming about how you can be a better presenter, how you can be more influential, which is important, we want to talk through those things. We start off with talking about what's holding you back right now.
Mhm.
And that's where we can often blend in, right? Like, okay, what's holding you back, but what's also there that you can uncover? What strengths do you have that you can be pulling out that are actually going to help you do all the things you want to do that are already available to you. We just have to turn those dials up a little bit. So that's the most fun, but that's deeper than just here are 10 ways
Mhm.
that you can be more influential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're going, okay, in order for us to get a result, the influence or the presentations, let's understand you so that we understand how you can do this successfully.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
Mhm.
I think that's where the transformation comes in. I mean, I'm high adaptability, right? I can kind of go back and forth with people on things like, okay, here today we're going to go deep. Next week, maybe we're not going to go as deep. We meet the clients where they are, absolutely. But if you really want change that's impactful to your life and impactful to the lives that you impact, going deeper is a good way to get there. I'm not a therapist. I never finished that degree, so I don't pretend to be a therapist, and I uh, would refer people if that's what they need. But the real look at what's going on with you versus what's going on in this meeting, or what's going on with this person, what's going on with you, let's talk about that. There's something in there that we're going to pull out, that we're going to really get to talk about a lot and build on in order to get you the result that you came here for.
And so you have this you know, finance, FP&A stands for financial planning and accounting, correct?
And analysis. Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
analysis.
Mhm.
So do you typically work still today with that group of people primarily, or do you work across all aspects of the business with a variety of clients?
Yeah, it's across all aspects. I have worked with a handful of finance people, and I've had other folks recommend that I sort of niche in that area, if you will. But I like to learn about what people do. No surprise, right? So I don't necessarily want to just be serving this group. It may end up like that way, in that way someday. We'll see. But it doesn't matter to me if you're in finance, if you're in sales, if you're in marketing, communication, whatever it is, you're still a person. It's not so much about the department that you're coming from as it is the person that you're bringing to the session. So yeah, no surprise. I'm actually more intrigued when it's something that I don't know that I can learn a little bit about along the way.
Hmm. So if we look at your strengths profile, um, it's no surprise to me anyway that you would lean into coaching,
Mhm.
because you're not only, from a Gallup Clifton Strengths perspective, green, meaning you got that strategic thinking. And when we look at your strategic thinking, we see it's very academic, right? You love to
Mhm.
learn, you love to research, and you love to think and read.
Mhm.
But that also means you like to turn that back around as a resource, right? You might like to teach, you might like to give information, or you might like to ask those tough questions to get people
Mhm.
thinking about things. Now, if I took that and you had, execution strengths smashed together with those greens, I, might think that you would be doing something else with your life. But because you have, these blues, with this relationship building, um, how important it is to you to be engaging with other humans, it makes sense, right? To have these
Mhm.
academic learning green strengths, but mixed with this relationship building set on the
Mhm.
other side.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, can you share with us, like, how you see these, let's just say top 5 for a minute.
Mhm.
How are these really coming together for you? I mean, obviously, you're probably really in tune with how these have driven a desire for you to coach and help people, and then how you use those strengths to actually do that with people.
Mhm. Yeah. I love, first of all, I love this image because it does fit so clearly. I look at this and I'm just like, yes, that's me. There are times when I'm like, oh, but I need a little more execution, which shows up, right? In my 6 through 10, yes. But I look at that and it just completely resonates with how I feel every single day. I want to be I love to be very curious about people, about things, about events, and just learning anything that I can learn. And I turn that towards my clients. Tell me what's going on. Let's talk about this. Tell me about you. And I'm able to use that when it's, when I have it at the right level, I'm able to use that to stay curious about how they're going to become their best selves. Um, that harmony and that adaptability really help me to seek a best environment for them, something that's going to allow them to feel as if they are moving forward at the pace that they need to move forward. But it also allows me to just, I can see it right here with adaptability, to just go with the flow with the client. In a coaching session, it's really important that it's not about me, right? It's about the client, and the client could take us all over the place. Now I'm there to provide this through line of what we do and make sure that we get to something that's meaningful to them at the end. But that could be a really windy road. And so it helps me to be able to follow them, just to be able to be there in the moment with them, listening, asking those questions, being really super curious for them about things that they may not even know to be curious about, so that we end up where we want to be. Now, my input, my sort of my nemesis strength, if you will, because it has me all over the place. But that's the one that at times when something does need to get more tactical with the client, I have every resource under the sun they could ever need. I actually love it when I don't have the resource, because that means I get to go look for the resource and I get to find it and I get to bring it back and share it and deliver it. I get to study it myself, right? So that I think is certainly very different than the curiosity during the call, but that's where I contribute to the client in that way, or to the customer in that way. And then my intellection, you know, this was the one that, if like growing up, when someone would say, she's just being a daydreamer. We've just sort of lost her. And I just sort of zone out. Now I know what was going on. I wasn't zoned out, I was churning away. And so I may get off a call with a client and, thinking is an activity for me. Thinking is execution for me. And I want to sit down and I want to think through, how did that call go? Where was I on? Where was I off? What did they get out of it? How do I do even better next time for them? What do they need? I churn through all of that. It's almost it's almost a brain version of an empathy for me because I'm really processing everything to say, did I serve in the way that I really intended to serve? And if not, how do I do it better next time around? And
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't ever turn off, but I don't, you know, I don't usually want it to turn off. I love it. So I think when I see especially the top five, the green and the blue together, I'm like, yep, that's how I spend my day.
So when I look at your full spectrum, I say, oh, now I kind of see some of the finance.
Yeah.
I see
Yeah.
the the input, the consistency, the restorative, which are some strengths that I may see in a financial, some person that's in some financial arena. Those are typically a little bit higher for those people. So I find it interesting that maybe you were sitting in your, you know, number 5 through 10 strengths, or if we even look at this view, we could even see, is there anything else that you might have been kind of sitting in? So the question I have next then is, do you feel like when you were in the financial planning and analysis, do you feel like you were sitting down in here a little bit into the, 6 through 14, or even 3 through 14, and then when you found this coaching and development and learning and development, did you feel like there's no way that I can get paid to
Yeah.
do that because I will like it too much? I will like love my life and I'll actually get paid to do it on top of
Yeah.
it. Was that kind of like a hard transition?
There's still sometimes when that's a hard transition. There's still times when I'm like, really? You're going to pay me
Gonna
to do?
pinch yourself, wake up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think when I was in my finance role, as I sit here and listen to this, right, I was always forecasting. And forecasting, you're really just your vision casting, right? So your futuristic is on. Where are we trying to go? What are we trying to do? What can we create in the future? It's just all done in numbers. And as soon as you lock it down, you know that it's wrong and you just sort of move on and keep adjusting and going as you go. So then you bring in that some of that adaptability. I actually saw the first time I took strings. I have taken it more than once. The first time I took CliftonStrengths, learner, all of these showed up in my top 10, but learner showed up really high again. And I didn't really understand how it worked and what I do until I stepped back to think I have all of these clients that me and my team support around the company. And in order to help them come up with their budget for the year, their annual operating plan, we have to understand their business almost as if we walked in it ourselves. So I loved that.
Mm,
Even when I was tired of numbers, I loved going over to any particular group to say, tell me about what you do. Tell me what makes your life hard. Tell me what makes your life easy. Tell me what it would look like if we pull this lever over here with this metric, if we tweak this one here, what's that going to do? So I got to do that constantly with things. And I think that's probably more so than even the actual numbers themselves kept me really engaged for a while because it could change so frequently
mm,
what was going on, or I could pick up a new client or a new project or something, and I could really just dive in to what was there. Um, when I look at my when I look at my significance and my self assurance there, like that's how I went into some really tough meetings saying, guys, I know you're not going to like what I have to say, but this is what we have to do.
mhm,
That's how I was able to go in, restorative problem solve on some things, but stand really firm, even though I'm sure former clients, if they were listening to this, would still laugh. But there were times I was like, I have no idea what we're going to do. I don't know. We're just going to try to put something on paper and see what we can make work. But you've got to come in and you've got to look like you know what you're talking about, right? And sometimes all I was leaning on was some of that self-assurance and that adaptability and being like, well, let's let's see what happens and we'll make it work along the way. And that's
mhm.
what I did. So I think I pulled from all of them all along. Um, Interestingly, the first time that I took strings many years ago, learner to show up with significance was right after that. So it was even a little bit higher than that. And I took a lot of pride in the work that we did. And I took a lot of pride in working for such an incredible company. And I think that fed that sense of significance too, because I knew what we were about and I knew the importance of the work that our department did to keep to allow the airline to be able to continue being what it had been. Now, obviously we weren't the only ones. There's so much happening, but we played an important role in that too, and that always felt good to be able to hit those numbers.
Yeah, and I really love some of the examples you're giving, because a lot of people with harmony so high can be seen as conflict avoidant. Always trying to hold the peace, very non-conflict oriented, maybe even being seen as not being able to handle conflict. Where what you're saying is, no, harmony doesn't define me in totality,
Mm-hmm.
because I have other things that I can tap into when there does need to be some amount of conflict, when there does need to be some friction, or there does need to be a hand or a foot that's put down.
Mm-hmm.
It's me reaching down a little bit lower into some of my other strengths, and almost grasping at those feelings, right? The feelings that those strengths bring. Like, for example, restorative would be an intense feeling of wanting to solve a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's almost like, all right, not that you can't solve a problem harmoniously, you can, but sometimes it's not a harmonious process to solve a very difficult problem. There
Mm-hmm.
is some tension and friction. And so what I hear you saying is that, you will forego the harmony if you have to. You want harmony, you want
Mm-hmm.
consistency, you want alignment, you want peace. That's really way more comfortable for you. But there are times when you're going to reach down into your lower level strengths and pull aspects of those up in order to be most effective.
Absolutely. I will fully admit I don't love conflict. I don't want to debate about things, but there are times that in order to come to the point of harmony, we all need to get our thoughts and opinions out there, and those are going to be conflicting at times. And
Mhm.
so to leave room for that means that when we walk out at the end of the meeting, we may be saying we don't like it, but we're aligned. And
Mm,
so we're going to move forward. That to me is still harmony
mm.
because we've all come to a point of agreement in something and we've all said what we need to say and we're ready to move forward. But in order to do that, you've got to give people space and I've got to be sure enough in what I'm doing and believe enough in what I'm doing to be willing to hold my own space at that point.
So, um, I think we met at the when I got Gallup certified.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Just so you know, the man who supported that journey is on this call today, so that's
Ah,
really exciting.
welcome.
Um, yeah, I worked for Darren Pettit when I was at Sabre, and he really supported what I wanted to do from a Gallup certification standpoint. And so when I got Gallup certified, mm, I can't remember if it was when I was on your team, Darren, or if it was after, but it was, if it was after, it was shortly thereafter. But so when we met, were you on the learning and training and development
Mhm.
team at the time?
Yeah.
And were you getting certified at the time, or had you already been certified and you were just helping out?
So I had been certified as a coach, but not as a strengths coach. I had already transitioned out of my role in finance and into a role of learning and development within the finance department.
Mhm.
And then my peer, I had the leaders and she had the individual contributors, but obviously we were working very closely with everyone. The two of us had put together our business case. Southwest was going down this path of becoming a strength-based organization, and we had convinced our leaders, more her than me, because she had the high influencing themes, that this was a good thing for us to do. So they put us through the certification course, and we absolutely loved it and started rolling it out to the full department at that point.
So why did you and she decide that this was the right direction for
Yeah.
Southwest Airlines?
So it actually started at Southwest years before in a completely different department, and a couple of women who I was just at the Gallup Summit with who took it and loved it. And so they said, well, we really like this. I wonder if our department would like it. I wonder if our teams would like it. So it was very slow, like it often is, right? Just a few people who were like, well, this is kind of cool. This is helping us here. And they were trying to get it pushed out to the rest of the group. And they would have a little bit of success. They take a few steps forward, they take a few steps back, a few steps forward, a few steps back. But they also started doing some very small team building exercises with other groups. So that's how finance or FP&A actually got pulled into it long before my time. And my counterpart at the time, Christy, just saw the value in, first of all, celebrating what was good about people, right? Rather than we're in finance, we like to pull things apart, figure out what's broken, point out all the flaws, and then maybe put it back together. So to bring in the concept of, no, let's look at what we all do really well was a little bit different, but I think very accepted and embraced. It was just like anything else. It takes time. It was very slow moving along the way. It wasn't until probably about a year or so before I got certified that our executive team really started to embrace this. And the CEO currently is a huge supporter of having a strengths-based organization. And if you think about it, it really fits the culture that Southwest is known for, the culture of appreciating the people first and knowing that if you treat your people right, they will treat your customers right and everybody will be happy and then ultimately the stock, your investors will be happy as well. But it starts there with your people who come in every single day and make it possible to to have an incredible company. So it makes perfect sense that you would step back and say, well, don't we want to celebrate those people? Don't we want to understand what's great about them?
Mhm.
And that's exactly what strengths is. So it seems like a marriage that could have happened long before. It just took a little convincing to get everybody on board.
But it sounds like it's been successful there and
Yeah.
it's still used. Um, does Southwest Airlines ever talk about, what they believe it has done for the organization?
They do, and I don't have a lot of that information, so I'm not as privy to it
All
anymore.
right.
But I know that they do, and they were just recognized as one of the exceptional workplaces by Gallup at last week's summit. So they've continued to build on it. They've continued to name coaches. They've put strengths advocates in place in the various departments. Now, I don't know stepping back like how some of the executives would point out some of the stories, but the current CEO, Bob Jordan, spoke last year at Gallup Summit, and he had plenty of things to say about there, but I don't have any of the current information.
So did you say that they actually have, yeah, I heard you say they have advocates in the different departments, and do they actually have, Gallup certified coaches that's their full position, and people can come to them and get help from those
Yeah.
coaches?
I don't think for most of them, I don't think it's their full-time position. I think that they have a day job and then they also coach. And but as you know, those of us that like to coach, we're like, that's okay. I'll do this work if I can also do
Absolutely.
this.
Yeah.
So for the most part, I think that they actually have other responsibilities and then they're also known as the coach in the department. But
Mhm.
the organization has invested in them because they have gotten them certified. They do ongoing training and then the advocates themselves are typically not certified, but
Mhm.
they've got coaches supporting them. So the what I see, and just knowing that they were again just recognized, they've made a ton of progress. There's still a lot of room, runway, if you will, for continuing to build on it as a strengths-based organization. But they're wanting to do it. They're on their way and they're making it happen.
So besides the strengths facilitation and training that you did, was, as a leader at Southwest Airlines and a part of the learning and development team, I'm curious about if there were other specific programs that you felt were so impactful to the organization that you and your teams rolled out.
Yeah, we we did a lot of work, and I wouldn't say that. So here's my input, right? And possibly my adaptability. I have other certifications and I love a good certification, but what I really love is taking the best of several things and putting it together into something that works. So we did a lot of work around trust. We did a lot of work around healthy communication. We did a lot of work around just bonding and team building. And one of the things that I did very early on was just put these groups of leaders together and just have them come together and tell their stories. so that they could create connection. So these were things that I pulled from everywhere. I mean, as teams, we went through 7 habits. We did a lot of things like that. But what I really loved was like, ooh, you know what? I bet we could take this idea, and then we could actually create what we need for this group right here. So um, nothing really that stands out specifically. It was just more what's out there, what's available to us, what can we use, and then let's put something together that benefits the group.
Mm-hmm. So I'll pause my questions here for a minute because I know we have lots of curious people on this particular call. I'm going to open it up for some questions for Natalie. Does anybody have a question that they'd like to ask her today? Yeah, please. Oh, you're on mute, Chica. I muted everybody. There you go. You can ask to unmute. Diana, can you unmute for me?
Sorry about that. Am I
There you
good
go.
now?
You
Yes.
are good.
How interesting.
Thank
Wow.
you.
Yes. One thing I hear is that it sounds as though you more or less fell into your, I'm going to use the word calling
Mhm.
by
Yes.
accident. And I love that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I did. I think I fell into every job I ever had. But I love the way that you're saying that I fell into my calling finally, right?
Mhm.
Everything that I've done in my career is used in what I do now, but it's used in something that I absolutely love and feel that I was called to do. You're right.
And I would like to add to this. And you can piggyback on this, Natalie, but when I work with people with adaptability, I hear this story all the time. I go with the flow, I go from job to job, whatever comes, I take. It's not, they're just don't have the whole, I have to do it this way and I have to end up here and this is my goal. And they just don't have that structure in their mind. They're just able to just flex to
Yeah.
the situation or the environment. So I hear that when you're talking.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd like to say and just point out again is that I want you all to realize that she fell into her purpose because she did work with a coach.
Mhm.
And I think a lot about this because when you look at the elite professionals in this world, whether it's sports or whether it's, executives, they all have coaches. And so I really encourage every single one of you to connect with a coach. There are four coaches on this call today, I think. Dave is a coach, I'm a coach, Natalie is a coach, PJ is a coach. Am I missing any coaches? Pete, you'll happily coach as well, I'm sure. So if you guys are looking to work with somebody to help you in any way, I encourage you to reach out to these people on this call for that.
Absolutely.
Diana,
It
did
made
you have any another question?
Yeah, I do. When I listen to you, I keep hearing clarity.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really something that's big with you. Is that correct?
It is correct because, well, yes, it's correct. I have a lot of clarity. I also have a lot of openness to what's next. So this is what I do now, right? This is my adaptability again. I don't know what I'll be called to later. I don't know how it will change or adapt, but I'm along for the ride and I'm willing to go. But today, I'm very clear on what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, who I'm doing it for, and I'm open to tomorrow if it changes. And sometimes in those transitions, right, should something change, it's uncomfortable, it's awkward when the clarity is gone. But there's also so much to be gained in those transition times that I've been through enough of them to be able to be comfortable in them and to know that clarity is right around the corner if I'll just wait out any of the in between. I feel if you were to really ask me to place a bet on whether or not I'll be a coach for the rest of my career and beyond, I would say absolutely yes. But I also feel that it's really important to leave myself open to whatever feels like it's next.
And it sounds like you really have been doing this all
I
your life.
have. Yeah. Yeah. Didn't
Diana,
realize it, but yeah.
Diana, are you also a coach?
I am.
Yes. So Diana's a coach too, everybody. Sorry.
Yes.
But I need clarity. So I need a coach.
Clarity feels good when it comes along. And sometimes it's only little glimpses of it even, right? It's not that we get to sit in it for a long time, but
Yeah.
we do what's in front of us that day. And that's good.
Thank you.
Dave, I see your hand raised up there. Would you like to ask Natalie a question as well?
Yeah, I've got 2 or 3 questions. I'm not sure. So one of the things that I'm curious about, because the way you described input sounded like it was heavily influenced by your adaptability, that you will chase whatever pops into your mind or interests you to dig into and learn about. And given those two together, something that I run into with my adaptability is a lack of structure and a need for some structure. And I wondered first if how you do that, and then I wondered if Diana's mention of clarity is something that helps you with that.
Yeah, you're actually helping me with my response, David, as you ask the question, because yes, my adaptability does. I just like rabbit trails. I had to close. I decided I would close a lot of the open things that I had open for this call, just thinking that it might help. The number of tabs I had to close to get here. But as I'm closing them, I'm like, oh no, I forgot. I wanted to read that. I wanted to do that. I needed to know that. But it was all over the place, various topics, some related to coaching and leadership development, others related to travel, one related to color trends in 2023 that had nothing. It's just, it's everywhere. But you're pointing out something really important. When I get really, focus is lower for me, but when something becomes important to me or I see how something might contribute, then I can get really clear on where I'm putting my impact, how I'm keeping track of what I'm learning, how I'm making sure that I spend enough time on it to really be able to use the new knowledge, the new information, or the new resources that I'm in. And as far as keeping it organized, I think it's not really organized. It's really just like I just know stuff, those people. And I think high input people are like, yeah, I know where that is. And then you just close your eyes and you can see it, but no one else would ever figure it out. That's kind of how it works. If you ever hear of a great system, let me know, because I've never figured out one that but that's okay. My adaptability gets me through.
I am finding that to be a struggle as well. The other thing a second thing I was gonna ask you about, Randy asked you some questions about your harmony being number 2 and your willingness to kind of put that aside. I was looking at your empathy as being number 29 and thinking, well, sure, you're willing to be unempathetic just to get something done, right?
Yes, that's a really good thing to point out. Yeah, it is. I can if we have a goal in mind, and we haven't mentioned my consistency here a lot, but like if there's a structure to follow, something that we need to do, or something we need to accomplish, and we've set out the parameters of how we're going to do it, I can easily the empathy isn't there. The harmony gets pushed aside because it's like, this is what we said we were going to do. And in my mind, that's fairness to everyone because we're accomplishing what we said we needed to do. So those others go to the side. I had a coach point out to me one time that I've always kept this in mind. I thought it was so fascinating that sometimes I also put my own internal harmony aside for something, and to be really cautious and thoughtful about whether or not I'm doing the right thing for myself when I do that. So sometimes it's not only the external harmony which drives a result, it can be the internal harmony too. And that doesn't always feel good. So I have to pay attention to that.
Interesting. Yeah, I used to think I was empathetic, and empathy is actually 20 for me, so I kind of relate to that. One of the last thing I wanted to ask is something that Brandy mentioned to me, and I've been trying to be more aware of this. And I noticed in yours, your restorative is 9 and your maximizer is 13. And I think Brandy was the one that mentioned to me that people tend to, if they're high in maximizer, they're low in restorative and vice versa. And I've been seeing that that's fairly accurate, except in your case. How do those two work together for you?
Yeah, maximizer is about where I draw my line because sometimes I want it to be great. Other times I'm like, well, we've sort of solved the problem. We're good. So I only live in that maximizer world every once in a while. And I feel like because of that, I get to kind of choose when I'm going to double down on whether or not I accept good or accept great. But my restorative, it's one that I bet if I ask other people to describe, it would probably come out a lot, but it's one that I've really struggled to internalize for myself because I don't see it as much in me. But we also know that sometimes our strengths we don't see in ourselves,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, yeah.
And something that you're describing here, Natalie, I like to call strength intelligence, which is when you're really aware of your own strengths and you're really aware of which environments they are great in and which environments they are not necessary for or don't shine in, we can then choose to turn on particular strengths or flex those different strength muscles at different times to maximize the result.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, we've got to have that awareness. Strengths intelligence.
Yes.
Thanks, Natalie. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Dave.
What other questions are there out there? Does anyone else have questions for Natalie?
I have one.
Yes, please.
So, Natalie, want to lean into your intellection for a moment. So, there was a particular situation where I was going to give this strengths presentation for a company that had gotten a new CEO who wasn't there when they hired me. And the new CEO was a big growth mindset person, and she felt that strengths was in contradiction to growth mindset because of the fixed strengths that we're saying that people have and how they can shift and all that stuff. And so that turned into an interesting meeting. So I'd like to hear from you, your perspective on this nature versus nurture, this growth mindset, and that growth mindset and strengths can still shake hands and be friends. What's your thoughts?
What instantly came to mind for me as you were saying that was this image of this continuum of our strengths. And a growth mindset means that we're open-minded, we're listening, we're learning, we're never quite arriving at perfection or wherever we think we need to be arriving at. I think our strengths are the same way. So when I hear that, I hear a very fixed mindset actually, which is interesting. But
Yes.
I picture that, gosh, I know a lot about my learner, but I don't know everything about my learner. I'm still growing into that every single day. I just mentioned restorative I struggle with. I'm still growing into that every single day. And not only growing into my own awareness of it, my own strengths and intelligence, but also growing into how it allows me to be the very best version of myself every day. And every day is different. So it's got to be a constant balance. So to me, I think they walk growth mindset and strengths walk hand in hand because it just gives us some clarity, perhaps, on why we're like we are, and then some room and some language to think about, okay, well then how do I keep growing based on what I know today and where I'm going? So I feel like they're very complementary to each other.
Yeah.
How did you work past that, or are you still working past it with them?
No, that was I think 2 years ago. It turns out that the person that had hired me before they brought in the new CEO had positivity. So she believed it was still going to work out fine. I still believed it was going to work out fine. And then as it turned out, when it was time to do the presentation, it turns out that most of her employees kind of almost turned on her in a way because she was being nasty. She was saying, guys, don't listen to everything he says. Just always consider, challenge everything. Don't just believe everything you hear. And by the way, she had belief in her top 5, right? So she was telling them what to expect before I even stepped on. And then when I went ahead and stepped up onto the stage and presented, as people heard me lay it out, they started to call her out and say, well, wait a minute. You say you don't believe in belief, but everything you've said today was about belief. Don't believe everything you hear. Don't this, don't that. The idea of being skeptical. So it was interesting that while she meant for kind of a ruin in a way, most of the folks on the call were saying, no, we actually agree with him more so. But and I actually had to stop them because at some point they were really getting after like, no, you're wrong about that. You're wrong about that. And I was like, wait a minute, guys, wait a minute, hold on. We want to hear why she thinks that way and where she gets it from and all that. And so it turned out to be a very interesting thing, but we'll see what happens going forward. But that it was one of the best stories I tell because it's crazy.
That's a great just confirmation of the power of strengths there, right? What it can do. But I can think of, as you're saying that, I'm thinking about debriefs that I've done with people. Like when you're debriefing a lot of people and some of them just don't want to buy it, basically. And you sit down and you start listening to them and they just prove it all the way along. It happens
Yes.
99% of the time. It's like, oh, okay. So this isn't true. You just said this and you're saying this isn't true. Oh, sure. Okay.
I can tell you, I've never done a presentation where the person who introduced me was kind of throwing me under the bus, kind of, while they were doing it. I've never had that, but it was always fun for me as a learner input with
Uh-huh.
Maximize or Strategic.
Oh,
I
yeah.
was like, okay, let's see what
You
happens
can
when we
see
start
that
to pull
fast.
the layers back. And there
That's
it
awesome.
was.
So,
Thank you.
Natalie, when I obviously look at this spectrum of your strengths, I also go, okay, how do you deal with the things that are in the bottom? With the things that you don't think about, and what do you do to either compensate for them, or do you just say, well, I'm just not going to do that? Do you leverage other people's talents? Do you hire people to do certain things for you? Like how do you address the things that may be gaps for you?
Yeah. It's a challenge when you're on your own, right? When I was working, and I said I had a peer that I worked with, and she had high influencing themes, high communication and woo, which are there at the very bottom. So I could put the deck together and the story together. But then when we went in to talk about it, to present it, it's like, okay, now that's where you come in, and I'll just add some things. So we partnered really well together. And where possible, I do lean into people that have, their top or what's at my bottom. But otherwise, when I'm on my own, I have to figure out my way around it. I have to figure out how, it might sound difficult to not have high empathy and to be a coach, but I lean into my strategic thinking themes, my intuition, what I've learned about people, what I've learned about coaching to cover for not having the same empathy. So I might be able to see and spot their feelings, but I don't feel the feelings in the same way. But I know how to respond and how to be there and leave that space for them. So I really think it's learning to, just like, Gallup would tell us, learning to use the strengths that I do have
Yes.
to make sure that I can still do the things at the bottom. I mean, I have communication 34. Well, I have to communicate all day long. So my learner and my input even says, well, go figure it out then. And once you learn how to do it, you're going to do it. You're just going to do it in your own unique way. And it may never be as comfortable, but you're going to figure out how to make it work.
And so I don't know if you guys can see what I'm doing on the screen, but I pull the drop down, type in the particular thing to say, how can I do this thing through my strengths? So even though communication is 34, can I communicate? Yes, your learner allows you to, one, learn how to communicate, and two, it typically enjoys teaching. So if you can put yourself in a position of teaching, then your communication is probably going to be quite good because you care about if the other person is learning on the other end of that communication.
Yeah.
And the way you can read this is, it is a strong possibility that you're able to get this job done through this strength, or it's possible that she could get it done through her harmony input. It's unlikely that she's getting this done through the adaptability, intellection, consistency, because it's not really a focus of those strengths.
Yeah, I love that view. I can see that, and I can think, learner absolutely allows me to be a better communicator, especially when I'm very passionate, or when, if you look at my significance, when I feel like the topic is one that makes a difference, and I can get that message across, and I can do it with the right energy and the right language and all of the things that I need. But I lean most on my learner to make sure that I'm
Sure.
ready to go in and do it.
It also sounds though like when I hear you say, "Am I ready?" I know your input's on fire, right? Doing the
Yes.
research.
Yeah.
And then also it feels like if you were put on the spot and you were put in the spotlight, your significance would just kick in and really make you shine in that
Yeah.
moment.
Oh, yeah. There are times that I'm like, I wonder who that was, because it certainly didn't feel like me, but you've made it work because something was meaningful enough. And
Yeah.
my self-assurance tells me I'll get out of jams that I might find myself wandering into. I can figure out how to get out of it.
And I also think when you have learners so high, you just have a love to teach people. And so if any way you're going to frame it, it's going to be, well, maybe someone can learn something from this.
My
How do
biggest
they
challenge.
differ?
I'm sorry, how do they differ?
Mhm.
I'm sorry, which ones, Diana?
Learner and communication. How are
So,
they different?
So they're motivated differently. Learners love
yeah.
to learn. Communication
Mhm.
loves to talk.
So there's the internal, right? Like I'm learning, I'm getting to fill my head up with things, and the communication to me feels like the external. But I can communicate about something I've learned all day
Mhm.
long that I feel passionate about. One of the bigger challenges with my learner is when someone doesn't have high learner, and I'm almost insulted that they don't want to learn what I'm so excited about. So I have to remember that everybody gets to be wherever their strengths are, and
And
that's not what they want to hear.
communication loves to be listened to. They love to tell the story, right? They love to be heard. They love a captive audience. So
Mhm.
their motivation is to grab your attention with their wonderful, clear, exciting communication, where the learner is communicating because they love that you're learning.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They're motivated by the fact that you're learning something in this moment. The more you're learning and acting engaged, like you're learning something and excited, the more the learner is going to be speaking.
Yeah. Working with someone with high communication, she was very articulate, very articulate. The way that she could just paint a story was something I was always like, oh, I want to learn to do that better. And I just run out of the word. It just doesn't come into my head. But when I'm preparing for something, I not only have the learner, but Brandy, you hit on a little bit the input, right? Okay, I don't have this natural, beautiful, eloquent vocabulary, but I can sure go pull in some things that are going to help me sound more uh, influential in the conversation that I'm going to have.
Yeah, I found that talking to some people, I have a lot of lawyers for clients, and a lot of them are very much, the litigators at least, very, very talkative. And I found that one of the pieces to it was that it was about expression.
Mm.
They break down expression
Mm.
so to an nth degree, because they know if I say the wrong word, a jury wouldn't hear this, but if I said it the correct way, the jury would follow me the whole way through.
Yeah.
So they explain it as it's the ability to express an idea that everyone could sync up to quickly, to get that rapport to keep going. And so that was one little thing.
It's a beautiful, I love that way. Yeah. Sounds beautiful.
So we are right at 3 p.m. and I want to respect everybody's time. Is there any last burning questions that you'd like to ask Natalie before we let her go for the day? My question is, how do we get a hold of Natalie? So I'm going to pull up the LinkedIn file here so that you guys can find her online. Anything else, everybody? Natalie, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was so much fun.
Us today. This was so much fun. We loved getting to know you better and hearing about your journey at from the dating, from the matchmaking to Southwest Airlines to your current day coaching and leadership coaching. Just really appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Nice to meet you all. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, Natalie. Thanks, Brandy.
Yes,
Thank
thanks,
you.
guys. Thanks for joining.
That was great.
Thank you.